Welcome to the after show, the political section of the Improbability Engine. I'm here with my buddy Joe Darnell. And Joe, what's on your mind regarding politics this week?
Well, the biggest is we're still in the Trump transition phase. We're seeing some of what he's bringing to his cabinet level positions. The thing that stands out to me is I thought he said he was going to drain the swamp.
You know, he didn't really mean that he wasn't going to have insiders in his cabinet.
I mean, he's got George W. Bush cabinet level retreads. He's got, former Republican presidential nominees being thrown about, former vice presidential nominees for the Republican Party being bandied about. Did he mean he was going to drain the swamp, or did he mean something different? Does drain the swamp mean something different to him than it does to me? Because I thought he was, the big talk I've heard from a lot of Trump supporters is it's going to be an outside the beltway presidency. That's why we support him. It's going to be changed. This looks like the same thing that's always kind of been. What's up?
Well, I have a theory.
I'd love to hear it.
Nothing ever changes. I mean, if you look at government in the United States, especially over the last 35 years,
right,
you don't really see much change.
Will, you're inciting a nihilist part of me that I'm not happy with right now.
I mean, we didn't really get anything dramatically different when Barack Obama was elected. I mean, he's basically continued the warmongering policies of his predecessors with drone attacks all over the world, and so no real change there. The neoliberal policy, as far as economics, hasn't changed. Everything's still geared toward benefiting the people at the very top. And so I really haven't, so as much as we think that Donald Trump might usher in the end of the world as we know it, it's probably just going to be the same old world we've known for the last 35 years.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how the country responds to that, because there is a real and tangible feeling, as shown by the result of the election, of people being angry. They're upset with the way things are. And 4 more years of the way things are just continuing on, I don't know what's going to happen. It to me is, it's going to be a telling 4 years, and it's going to be painful for a lot of people.
Well, I've seen things, articles and news reports about people in Appalachia, particularly Letcher County, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those people are on government assistance, and a lot of them are on Medicaid.
Yep. And
they're worried that they're not going to be able to get health care. But they voted for Donald Trump and Matt Bevin. This is the mind-boggling thing here. They evidently, either they didn't know, which I find hard to believe, that Matt Bevin and Donald Trump wanted to do away with those programs,
right,
or drastically cut them back. Either they didn't know that, or they knew it and voted for them anyway, which I truly do not understand. And I don't know how they could not know that they wanted to do away with those programs or roll them back, because one of Bevin's key points in his campaign was doing away with Connect, and one of Donald Trump's major selling points was he's going to get rid of Obamacare.
Yeah, it's funny to see how quickly things change. A couple years ago, Bashir's still in office in Kentucky. Connect is one of the most successful implementations of healthcare ever. We saw a double-digit explosion in the percentage of people who were covered by health care due to the Affordable Care Act on the federal level and its implementation in Kentucky Connect. It worked. It worked. Now, was it perfect? No, it wasn't perfect. But it worked. The goal was, and let's not mince words here, this was a Republican plan that pushed people onto private health care, into health insurance companies' roles, pushed them to do it. Says, no, this is how it's going to be. You've got to buy health care. This is a Republican plan. And it worked. Now, was it ideal? No. But if that was the plan that could get passed, fine. It's better than not having those millions of people covered.
Well, I don't agree.
You don't agree? You don't think that it was a good plan at all?
No, I don't. I would have opposed it if it had been proposed. Say John McCain had won the election and he had proposed it, which basically he said that he would.
Right.
If I would have been against it then. It makes no sense to have a middleman.
I understand completely.
It just doesn't, and it's fascist to force people to buy anything from a particular corporation. Now, people don't generally understand what the word fascist means. It's government run for the benefit of corporations, right. And that's what this is.
Right, and I can appreciate that, and I understand. I think the moral imperative of we have to have something to get people covered because people are dying at rates that are unfathomable for a first world nation. And that's
Medicare for all.
That's the logical inference, but if you can't get the law passed, then it doesn't matter. And that was the breaking point in my concept of, okay, well, once Obama gets elected, maybe the grown-ups will take over and we'll get some things.
Well, let me give you an idea here for a program that I think Republicans could support and Democrats could support, and I think would work better. Okay? There used to be a program called the Hill-Burton Fund, and in the late 90s, they allowed for, the bill was allowed to...
Already, y'all sold in okay?
Yep, doing great, thank you.
The bill was allowed to lapse, okay?
Right.
So... but what it did was it gave money to hospitals for expansion and buying equipment. In return, hospitals provided free care to people who were indigent. When my son was born, he was in intensive care for 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. The hospital bill was $18,000. The Hill-Burton Fund paid for all of it. We didn't have anything left. Now, why couldn't we reenact that and expand it to include physicians so that physicians could get a deduction from their taxes for providing free care?
I think that would be good. A way of encouraging doctors to do that. I think that's a big deal. I think what we've got is we're at a crux. We're at a crossroads here. We've had 30 or so years of healthcare costs exploding, and I don't see that ending. I just don't. I mean, the baby boomer generation's getting older. It just is. You know, it's one of those things where they're going to require more healthcare, and if you don't take steps now, and I'm not talking about the ones that are being pushed by far-right Republicans, the ending of Social Security as we know it, the privatization of it, which is stupid. Do people not remember what happened during the Bush administration and how anything could happen to the stock market? The stock market is not a logical thing. It's just not.
That's true.
It is lemmings. That's all it is. You're watching lemmings run from one direction to the other, and every once in a while, the big group of lemmings run off a cliff.
And it's driven by emotion.
Absolutely. And you don't want that. You want something that's safe and secure. But what people don't understand is that the reason why Social Security is financially in trouble is because the Reagan administration started borrowing against Social Security. They started taking out money from Social Security and spending on other things.
Well, they did, but and we're going to disagree here.
Okay.
What else were they to do?
Not cut taxes 20%,
No.
30%?
Okay. Here, what I'm saying is, it's not like, I mean, they had to put the money somewhere, so Treasury bills is considered the safest place to put the money.
Agreed. Yeah, no,
so,
I'm right there with you.
I don't see that there was anything wrong with them buying Treasury bills with it.
It's not unto itself, but then having the same politicians talk about how it is untenable.
Well, yes, that's ridiculous.
It's the same concept with the Postal Service.
It's like they want to default on the Treasury bills held by the Social Security Administration.
Exactly. Look no further than the Postal Service. The big talk is that the Postal Service loses money. It's never going to have enough money. It's always going to run out of money. They're the only agency in the federal government who has to prepay their pension fund. They have to prepay. They don't get the opportunity to pay as they go, like every other thing in the country.
Right.
They prepay. They hire somebody, they prepay their pension. It's no wonder they run huge deficits. They're prepaying all their pensions. And people get upset when the price of a stamp goes to, it goes up 3 cents. It's an attempt to get people to believe that they are fiscally unsound, and they're not. Did you know that Medicare, 3% goes to their management fees? 3%.
Medicare and Social Security, they're among the most, absolutely.
Fantastic. And that's compared to other countries as well. Even the NIH in England is at like 5%. Now, that seems like a large dip. Oh my God, almost 100% more until you look at private insurance, which even under the Affordable Care Act is like 15 or 20%.
Right.
It's incredibly inefficient. It is inefficient to give money to companies who spend money on advertising and pay wages to people and give, benefits and golden parachutes and all that. You never hear anybody retiring from the Social Security Administration with a $20 million golden parachute. You know why? Because it doesn't exist in the Social Security Administration.
That's very true. But, I don't know. I don't know that there's support for what actually needs to be done. So, I mean, we'll have to see. But I think we strayed a little bit from where you wanted to go in our political discussion.
Right.
So,
no, the reason why I bring up the idea of draining the swamp and why that was a big telling point for people who voted for Donald Trump. I did not vote for Donald Trump. I don't believe you voted for Donald Trump. But that is not the point here. The point is that there are numerous millions of people, even if 50% of his support, they didn't matter what he said, they were going to support him anyway, there are still millions of Americans who have just been caught in a bait and switch. They were told one thing, and now they're getting it completely switched up on them.
do you think it will upset them?
It depends. Do they realize it's happened? Because if you don't realize it's happened, what's the difference? I mean, we're living in an age of misinformation. When Fox News can sue the Canadian government for the right to tell lies as news, you know something crazy is happening. You know something's happening that's crazy. In France this week, there was a lawsuit filed against the French government because the French government said that websites could not mislead and lie to women who were pregnant about information on abortion. There are groups in the United States today who pose as women's health providers whose only job is to keep women from getting abortions. And they'll do it in some really misleading ways. And that's the problem that we've got right now. We've got a situation where lies are as good as the truth, and we can't have that.
Well, fake news is a huge problem. We're in an age where things have changed dramatically. 60 years ago, most people got their news from newspapers. 40 years ago, most people got their news from television. Today, most people get their news from Facebook. And
unfortunately,
most of the news on Facebook is either completely fake.
Right.
I mean, the story itself, none of the items in the story are true. Okay?
Right.
Or the headline is a lie. The story, yes, the story may be true,
right,
but the headline bears very little relation to what's actually in the story.
The goal is to get you to click on something, or assume that you won't click on it, you'll just share it.
Right. That's right.
And no, that to me is the biggest thing. In my generation, I've watched it. To me, the last great newsman was Tim Russert. Tim Russert was the toughest interview in television, and he took it to Democrats, to Republicans, to anybody. He was brutal as an interviewer because he would not let you get away with not answering the question. And if it's a question you didn't want to answer, good luck. You're going to answer the question.
Now,
and there are no more newsmen like that.
I've been reading about fake news sites lately that put these stories on Facebook, and they fully admit that the stories are fake. One of the stories was a story that suggested that Hillary Clinton had arranged to have someone murdered, someone who had been involved in the email scandal. And the story was at a site called the Denver Guardian. The site looked like it was a newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
And the Denver Guardian sounds like a newspaper. So you see it, and you look at it, and you think, this is a news story. But if you looked a little farther, you would find that it was the only story on the website.
Right.
There were other sections, local news, sports, business. There were no stories in any of the other sections. And there's no such newspaper as the Denver Guardian. It was set up solely to broadcast that one story.
Mm-hmm.
Millions of people believed it, and none of it was true. And the guy behind the site admits, we just made it up. We did it to make money and to influence people, and that's why we did it, and it worked. We made millions of dollars.
The thing to remember is when I was a kid, I would go grocery shopping with my mother, and while we were getting ready to check out, we'd have a buggy full of groceries, and we'd sit there, and I'd be looking at the candy bars and the bubble gum and all the stuff that's right there just so they can get people to buy it. And there would be the National Enquirer or whatever.
The Weekly World News.
The Weekly World News or whatever, the Globe. I mean, and it would have something like, I don't know, Elizabeth Taylor adopts alien child, plans on raising it with Michael Jackson. You know, that was the original. What we're seeing now is that we've got a bunch of people who don't have the ability to discern between reality and abject lies. We've got that set up right now. And the book of Hosea in the Bible says something to the effect of, my people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge. That's where we are right now. We have aggressively adopted an anti-intellectual stance that says, well, the more you know, the less you know, which is inherently dumb. It's short-sighted and doesn't work. You can look no further than the criticism of Barack Obama not knowing the Constitution. Never mind, he was a constitutional law professor at Harvard. This is a guy who absolutely knows the Constitution. Now, you can say he might not know what the Supreme Court will judge constitutional in the future. Nobody does. I'm okay with that. But he knows the Constitution.
Here's the thing that just drives me up a wall, okay? Republicans like to say that we should revere the Constitution, we should adhere to the original intent, and we should follow the Constitution. But they want to change it 6 ways from Sunday. They want to get rid of the 13th Amendment. They want to get rid of the 14th Amendment. They want to change the First Amendment. And they want to put another amendment in there to establish term limits for Congress. If they revere the Constitution, why do they want to change it so much?
I'll go you one further. They want the Second Amendment to be progressive and living, while the rest of the document is dead.
That's right, because the Second Amendment refers to militias.
Militias, and the idea of keeping and bearing arms. Okay, then you can keep 17th century and 18th century weaponry in your house. Congratulations. That was the original intent.
Yes, for the purpose of being in a militia.
For the purpose of being in a militia. Congratulations.
And, people don't know what militias are now. My church, I go on Wednesdays.
Please don't say they have a militia.
No.
Okay, all right.
I go on Wednesdays, okay, and we study church history.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've been studying is the persecution of Mormons in the 19th century. And local communities, each county had a militia, okay?
Yeah.
Whereas today, you don't have anything like that.
Right.
But at that time, each county had a militia.
Right.
Now, I'm not exactly sure why. I suspect it had something to do with the fact that, the Native Americans didn't like the fact that we had stolen all their territory and would occasionally exhibit their displeasure with that.
The other thing you'll find is if there was no federal force nearby, the Posse Comitatus Act in the 1860s said that the Army can enforce federal law in the United States. But the states didn't have a large state force either. The counties would have a sheriff and maybe a deputy or two. The cities might have a town marshal and maybe a deputy or two. If at any point they needed to organize a group of people, they would have to call up a posse. Well, these are people, if it's a dangerous situation, who are untrained, unskilled, have no abilities whatsoever, and might not even have their own weaponry. Insert the militia, who could be brought in to quell, riots in a city, who could stop race battles, which happened more often than not at the turn of the 20th century. There was a lot of them. Look no further than Tulsa on that one. Tulsa had Black Wall Street that it was completely destroyed due to race riots.
But imagine, just so that people understand, imagine if here in Callaway County we had a militia and all men were required to or expected to have weapons so that if they were called up, the militia was called into action. I mean, it was a totally different world then. Now, occasionally, the militias went rogue and did horrible things and killed people they shouldn't have been killing.
Which is why people have moved away from this model. Here's the thing you got to remember. When we talk about the Second Amendment and militias, at the time of the writing of the Constitution, just about every man had a gun. Right? But they had one. They'd have one. It was for hunting and self-protection, sure, because you needed that. They didn't have police. They didn't have any of the things that we look to now as having. Since that time, right now, currently, 3% of gun owners in the United States own 50% of the guns in the United States. Now, these are legal guns. We don't want to talk about the illegal ones, but how incredibly backwards has it gotten? What militia will 3% of the people join to cause any kind of positive change? The answer is no. The thing that's important about that, even if you look at the United States Code, you and I are in a militia. According to U.S. Code, we are semi-able-bodied men under the age of, I think it's 55. You're in the 55, right?
No.
Well, then I'm in the militia and you're not. We're part of an unorganized militia. Now, this is part of a national defense setup that says that they can, it's like the draft. They can call people in at any time in terms of national emergency to defend the country. Totally fine. If we're in an unorganized militia, then now we're all subject to the concept of well-regulation. Because it doesn't say a completely unregulated militia. It says a well-regulated militia. The right to keep and bear arms, well-regulated militia, shall not be infringed. Fine. Now we're arguing about what's the definition of well-regulated. There are people who think that any regulation is poor regulation, and that's not what the reading of it says. It's going to be an interesting next 4 years, and I look to see what's going to happen with that. I'm concerned from the talks of Muslim registries and the rolling back of anti-discriminatory legislation, or even the ending of such things that are like the number of police shootings. We're going to keep track of those now. If that goes away, there can only be one reason for that, and that's because they don't want to see what the results are.
Are we done?
I think we're done. I think that's the end of our after show.
That brings to an end this edition of the Improbability Engine. Join us next week.